I want to welcome you to the Pro Mindset Podcast. The Pro Mindset Podcast is all about diving into the headspace that results in championship performance. High-performing athletes, winners, have this mental flow and have a positive headspace for their performances and success. Join me, Craig Domann, sports attorney and NFL agent, on this podcast. I will interview pro athletes, college athletes, football coaches, and sports personalities. Together, we can discover how you can get in the flow and have your own pro mindset.
Hey, I want to welcome today to the show David Boller from Arizona State, and he's been with numerous NFL teams, numerous Power 5 universities. He's been at Louisville, Arizona State, his alma mater. He's been at Syracuse. He's been in the NFL with the Lions, the Bucks. Dave, where else have you been?
Oh, after the Bucks, it was Philadelphia Eagles, Rams, Lions, Jets, and then I went back to college football.
Holy smokes. So you spent about half of your career in the NFL and about half of your career in college. Where you're at in your career today, which one is your favorite?
It's a great question. I am probably about 50-50. I'd have to add it up myself, but I think when I started out, I never saw myself leaving ASU, and plus going to school there. And I just took so much pride. I didn't even know there was another world out there. And when I finally got convinced the NFL came around in my early 30s, I got out there and go, man, there's a whole new world out there. But let me tell you, it was tough at 30-some years old when I thought I knew it all. And I got trained by the best at Tampa Bay, Tim Ruskell, Rustin Webster, Jerry Angelo, Rich McKay. They did a great job bringing me along, and all of a sudden I saw different colleges. They got barns in the Midwest. They practice indoors because of the weather. I saw facilities I'd never seen. We didn't have facilities at ASU. And then as my pro career went on, I guess I always had goals. I always saw myself as a college director or pro director, though. But I think I started missing the day-to-day players, getting along, meeting players, being with players and coaches, and thinking I could maybe make a difference. So I started aching a little bit to go back to college football, and recruiting had come 180, where now you had, instead of one guy, you had staffs. And I just kind of kept looking at it to see what people were doing. And my only question was, could I still relate to kids at 50? And when I went back, it was easy, and it was fulfilling. Knowing, in the NFL, you get to draft maybe your favorite player once every 10 years. But, you're selling your university, your head coach, and once you get a player, you have them there for 4 to 5 years, and you may help the kid grow personally or help them even professionally get ready for the NFL. That's very rewarding to me.
That's awesome, David. Okay, David, I'm going to bounce all over the place today, and I'm going to start out by asking you, when you were an NFL scout and you were doing evaluation, describe for the audience what you were looking for. Let's just say quarterback. You pick the position. I don't care. Whatever one you want to talk about. What are the traits you're looking for a guy that he may not necessarily be a first rounder. He might be a third-day guy, but he's going to be a baller.
Again, Craig, I was fortunate who trained me. You hear about always the Ron Wolf Web, and I don't think Rich McKay gets enough credit in Tampa when you had Jerry Angelo, Rustin Webster, Tim Ruskell come off that staff, even Dennis Hickey. What Tim and Jerry did for me, and then John Gold at Philly, they really gave me a groundwork. When I started in pro football, I remember coming home from training camp, and my wife picked me up. I'd been there like 15 days, and she goes, "What's wrong?" I said, "I think I screwed up." She said, "What are you talking about?" I said, "I don't know if I can do this." From my already 8 years of recruiting college football, I didn't have the terminology. And what do you see on this play, David? Oh, that's lower strength, or that's anchor. That's great upper strength, or he has lower strength, he can anchor. His slide, his redirect on the line of scrimmage. But I think what it started for me was Tim saw something in me because I had never really coached. Personnel had always been my background, so I was never going to teach on film. What he wanted me to see is athletic ability. And it doesn't matter what position that is, quarterback to defensive back to wide out to offensive line, they're all athletes. So my first line of the report was saying what kind of athlete this player was. You had Ken Blackman early on as an agent. I missed a little on Ken because he was playing left tackle. He was not a good athlete at left tackle. But, I hit on Ken as an athlete. Yeah, I didn't understand after my first year, well, shoot, he's going to be a better inside player at guard, so we saw him at these all-star games. So there's just one example I learned early on, but I hit those dudes as athletes. So that's how my first part of my report would be: describe him as an athlete, then I gave his strengths, then I'd list what his weaknesses are, then what I thought how he would fit in on our team as a, first-year starter, backup, role player, special teams, or a good free agent that might roster, something to that effect.
Hey, Dave, hang on a second, Coach. I got to ask you, there's such an emphasis on athleticism, and I want to dive into that because athleticism sometimes it goes hand in hand with guys' instincts, but sometimes they're mutually exclusive. A guy's got phenomenal athleticism, but he's running really fast in the wrong direction because he doesn't have instincts. Describe for our audience, what does athleticism mean? Just kind of like dive into, what does that mean?
Well, athletic ability is more, like you said, than just a 40 time. That way, some guys are non-athletes who just run a 40. You call them a straight line speed guy. Athleticism, you always hear the old coaches say, hey, he has to be able to bend his knees. I do believe every position you bend. I've never understood ankle benders, but I do believe in knee benders, and change of direction is big on athletes. You know what I mean? Offensive linemen have to be able to bend. Defensive linemen have to bend and get low. The great defensive linemen are athletes are the ones who can come across, bend their neck, their shoulders, and it's almost like running a hoop at an angle. The tall, stiff guys almost run upfield straight. So athletic ability at corner, a guy who can stop at a dime and change directions. Get out of his break real quick. Receivers that have no wasted motion coming off their breaks, cutting in their routes. Great feet. Again, knee benders on the offensive line. I do believe there's a place in the NFL because not everybody are great athletes. Back in the day when we started this, you always said your first day of draft, 1 through 3. I always thought those were athletes. 5 through 7, I'm going to find you some kid at Michigan State in the 5th round that's tougher than heck, smart, and he's going to be, hey, John Runyon was a 4th round pick. There's one for years ago, played 15 years plus National Football League. It wasn't because he was an athlete. It was because he was smart, he studied the tape, and tough and mean as heck. So non-athletes can play too, but, the NFL, all those athletes go quick. You're fine. It's easy. They'll end up rising to the top if you know what you're looking for.
So what position was the toughest for you to evaluate where you might have had a lower batting average?
I guess I was blessed, though. Like I said, going back to Tim at Tampa, 3 years of hard training. Then when I went to Philadelphia and I had like a kind of promotion, I was doing the whole country. But John Boller worked me as hard as anybody for 3 years. And I think John really got me real good on offense and defensive line because that's what he played for. And we had a young scout at the time named Mark Ross who played receiver at Princeton. But Mark was very good at corners. So if I had a weakness, I would have said corners. I still think it's one of the toughest positions to hit on and to make sure you're right on because a lot of times, so many going round one that you thought were great athletes and they're bust in 3 or 4 years. And then receivers for me wasn't athletic though so much. I always want to know who's the next Jerry Rice, like the guy who runs 4.7 and should go in the first round and be a Hall of Famer because everybody thinks speed has to play out there. And you know what? I remember seeing Anquan Bolden, and my boss goes, "What do you think?" I said, "Geez." I said, "What's wrong with him?" He goes, "He's going to probably run a 4.8 on his pro day." I'm like, "Really?" And it was who had the balls to take him. And Arizona took him in the second round. It was a great pick, but we had him right up there, just where your needs are,
Hey, Dave, he had over 100 catches as a rookie.
It was unbelievable. I can name, I'll never. The other receiver I think I missed on because I never saw him as a one. I thought he'd be a great slot guy, great returner was Stephen Smith from Utah. And he had some character things coming out, but, I can give you my misses or hits. And I don't know if I really missed, but I had him in the 3rd or 4th round, but I just never saw, him as a number one wideout in the NFL.
Okay, David, when you're on campus and you're an area scout or a regional scout or national scout, and you're checking out, the guys on your list. You're talking to the position coach, the strength coach, the trainer, the football secretary, the academic advisor, maybe some other people. What are you digging for? What are you trying to find out? Maybe different things from different people.
We had a list. Most of us were in combine, so you had a starting list. I would try to find that strength coach or a coach first thing in the morning. Hey, here's my list. Is there anybody else I should be looking at? And maybe some junior that was hurt all year, and all of a sudden week 4 he's starting to play. Because I always wanted to find, they used to call me the bottom feeder. The first 2 rounds are all given. Everybody has a grade. But when it came to 5 through 7, I always thought Coach Reed trusted me on my area. And, I would find a guy that was a little bit better than that round. But I think what you're looking for, I know what you're looking for. Number one, there's things that you cannot, that are in every good football player. Does he love the game? That is the hardest thing to find out. I hated the question at the combine. Hey, what are we going to do if we give you $1 million? Heck, you give Dave Boller $1 million, I don't know what he's going to do tomorrow. But the guys who really love football, that's hard to find because a lot of these guys are playing. They like the game, but hey, they're playing for a good paycheck or that second contract. But the guys who are smart with football and love the game, those are 2 characteristics that usually keep them in the National Football League longer than everybody else. And then, of course, the character thing. I'm all for second chances. I don't know if I'm all for 3 and 4s because, you hate that saying, lepers don't change their spots, but you usually don't. If I'm not lazy. If I was, I would have never been in the National Football League as long as I was. I think if you have a weight problem, you're always going to have a weight problem. Character, the same thing. It's hard to play in the National Football League if you're not smart. I do believe of the Wonder League, just because it's a low score doesn't mean you're not smart. It just maybe means you have a reading problem or you have to learn a different way. So that doesn't, shit can a kid in my words. It just means, hey, I'm going to let my coaches know we got to get this guy on the board and find the best way he can learn. But I do believe all that goes in there. You try to find how he's off the field socially. And today it's a lot different with the internet. These kids with Twitter and Instagram, they can bury themselves. Back when we started, Google wasn't even around. So, you couldn't just find out what a guy did online. You had to dig harder. And trust me, I remember walking into a room before and, hey, you didn't tell me this guy tested positive 3 times. Well, he didn't. That's hearsay. I maybe knew the trainer, and the trainer's not allowed to publicly say because of drug tests. But he goes, hey, Dave, no, it's all not true. So there's some things you couldn't get back in the day, and drug testing was a tough one. But I think in today's world it's changed a lot. There's so many states marijuana's legal in. So what is it? What is the problem? So. But it all goes in the puzzle. I took great pride on knowing my area. And when I did the whole country, I think I always had someone or 2 guys on a staff that trusted me, and I'd get better information than everybody else. And again, even a assistant AD maybe on the staff, shoot, there's nothing wrong with talking to the janitor, the equipment guys. Hey man, hey, how does Craig Domann act around the locker room? Equipment guys are good. Trainers, hey, how does he respect your students, female or male? That's so huge. Today in today's harassment world. So character's a big deal, I think sometimes the smaller your board, when you make sure, hey, these guys are the type of guys you want to be Philadelphia Eagles or Tampa Bay Buccaneers. They got great work ethic. They're tough. They're smart. They stay out of trouble socially. They keep, and football's important. That's you keep most of those guys on your board, you can have a good draft.
I agree with that. I think the love of the game, I'm going to go back to the love of the game. I do truly believe that is the defining characteristic of a guy that's going to play a decade or more compared to everybody else. There are a lot of players that have the God-given ability. They're hard workers, but they don't love the game. They can play 5 years. Some of them only play 2. Some might play 7. But if you're going to play football in the NFL into your 30s, You have to truly love the game.
I agree. I mean, and that's a hard thing to find, because every kid, you talk to, I love football. Really? Do you? You know what I mean? Are you out there working in the summer? I mean, when I went back to college football, we had a guy named Sheldon Rankin, and
Louisville.
Rod Marinelli is still one of my closest friends, and Rod was at the Cowboys, and Rod called me. It was on a weekend. He goes, "Hey, tell me about this Sheldon Rankin. He's your type of player. He's the kind of guy that's going to get that group in the shower room before we kick off and get them going. He sets the tone at practice. He sets the tone at game. He doesn't have to speak real loud because people know him. When he does speak loud, look out." And that day, I happened to walk in at our complex. It had to be, March 29th on a Saturday or Sunday. And there's a guy in a hooded sweatshirt running hundreds in that field, right? Now, he ain't on the beach in California. He's not in Florida working out with some agent. He's running in Louisville, Kentucky, and it was probably 50 degrees in a hooded sweatshirt running hundreds on a Sunday morning. Most guys are still sleeping. And I took a picture of that and sent it to Rod. This is why you take this guy in the first round, And he went a lot higher than I think, I tried to sell him, and a lot of scouts wanted, but that's how the football was important to this guy to succeed. And you see it now. Bar an injury or two, he's produced since a rookie. So.
Okay, David, I'm going to put you in the GM chair. You were most recently, the general manager of the San Diego AAF franchise. If you were the current GM of the Oakland Raiders and one of maybe your best, most talented player is doing what AB's doing, how would you handle that?
Wow. That's a good, I had a good relationship with Coach Martz in the AAF, and we weren't going to put up with none of that. No one's bigger than the team, A lot of it's still carried on, a lot of the concepts of college football. But when you're in the National Football League, you're dealing with huge numbers, huge egos, both sides, personnel, coaching, and players. So I don't know the whole background of his contract, how much they paid free agency, what they gave up. So are you more lenient in that way and forgiving? Probably. But there's got to be a time where you got to say, hey, man, enough's enough. Get into camp. You preach football is important. Get in camp. You're part of this team now. It's not an I deal. It's a we deal. And we all want to go to the Super Bowl. So somehow I think it takes big Weibos to make that swing and say, hey, see you later, cut. But with his contract and what they've just done, I don't see that. You're accountable to the owner. You're accountable to everybody. But that's a tough one. I know what I would like to do. I'm sure a decision like that, as a GM, you probably have to have the owner's blessing.
What would you do, David?
I would definitely suspend him. I would say, and I'll put him on PUP or something. I mean, if he's not going to practice, it's a league deal with the helmet. I've followed it a little bit. I would think Antonio Brown wants to work because he doesn't get paid if he doesn't play. I'm sure there was some signing bonus money, but you know what I mean? Being a sports agent, those guys have to play in games to earn their paycheck. So if he has that drive, you think he'd want to be out there, he'd want to be out there playing. So
I just looked up his contract, and he did get a $1 million bonus when he went to Oakland, but the rest of the money is a go-get-it money.
You probably could tell us $1 million bonus. Let's say they did cut him, and they probably could get some of that back. I know.
They could. They could get it all back.
I know it was like the Lions right before that. They had given Charles Rogers a bunch of money, and they got some of that back. He didn't give it. I don't see, you watch Hard Knocks a little bit. I haven't seen episode 3. I will today. But I don't see Coach Gruden putting up with it much longer. And Mike's new in that position. That has to be tough on him. But I'm sure he's getting advice from people he knows, people in the Raiders organization have been there. But I can't see Coach Gruden, putting up with that.
Well, he's got a $49 million contract over 3 years. All 49 of it's guaranteed. But by him missing one meeting, one practice, he's breached his contract.
Wow. Well, there's your way out right there.
Yeah, they got it. They definitely have a way out.
Sooner or later, I mean, the chemistry with Derek Carr and him, they got to get going. You're going to lose respect of the locker room. So I know how I'd call it, especially the more you say that, in that contract. So it makes it a little bit easier.
A lot of times when a team's faced with a dilemma like this, the player's already got the money in his pocket and they've got to go get it.
That would be tough.
In this case, they don't have to go get anything. They can just shut off payments. Okay, so let's talk about when you talk about a small board and getting ready for the draft. If you were running an NFL team today, what would be your target number and why? But what is a workable number in your mind?
Well, there's a rumor on the street. I don't know if you ever heard that. New England's always at 150 or below. I thought our strongest boards at Eagles were under 250. And I've seen boards over 300, especially, wideouts with three receiver systems. There's tons of wideouts on the board. And when you go to free agency, you're still plucking guys off between the 5th and 7th round because there's that many coming out every year. But I think what you do is like our hard years at Philly when we got there, the year before we drafted Donovan and Coach Rhodes' last year and then Coach Reed's, we took everybody off we thought had a hickey. Let's say there was Hines Ward. I loved Hines. Everybody did. We didn't have Hines on our board because we were worried about his knee. Everybody has different medical grades. Our medical grade, and Hines ended up playing for, 10-plus years? Guys like that stick out in my head. But if we didn't think they were, going to be great Eagle players by smarts, toughness, durability, or if they had a couple hickeys socially, we took them off because it all of a sudden you take off some percentages of misses. Everybody misses. But I think the more, the more you cut down those percentages, the better drafts you have. And I will give it to him at New England is he seems like he's hit on a lot of middle round guys that probably, were on people's boards too, but he really glued in on some of those guys, and there was characteristics that fit his model, and it works for those guys. Now, I know they've had misses, in the first round, just like everybody. I used to analyze everybody's drafts who were better than we when I was at Tampa or all my years. And I'm like, man, so and so missed on this linebacker in the first round, or why did they draft this D lineman in the first? Like I said, I like if I was a GM, I would like a smaller board. I just think you concentrate on those, get the ones the percentages are higher, and your draft percentage of guys that make it will be higher. One thing, Craig, is it never changes. I think if you're productive in college football, you'll be productive in the NFL. I think if you're durable, now there's always second chances. A guy who's been nicked up all his college career, but man, he can run, and when he is in there, he plays well. You're probably going to get the same thing. It's just his body's wired different, and I do believe that in production. You take a guy that works out on his pro day and had 5 college sacks at Oregon, and he ran well and did this, and you take him in the first round, well, guess what? 4 years later, he don't have 5 sacks and he's gone. It's just stuff like that. I do believe production, if you're a productive ball player, it's the same thing when I do high school kids to college. If you're productive in high school, you're probably going to be productive in college. You're just a winner.
Absolutely. I've always seen the NFL draft as, and I'm oversimplifying it a little bit, but the first round are the freaks. Those guys are genetically blessed, or they're quarterbacks that are winners that a franchise falls in love with, and they got to get a quarterback, so they'll take a reach on a quarterback any day. And the fourth round is where you see the ballers. That's the guys that are All-Americans in college. Their arms may be an inch short. They may be an inch short, period. They've got some defects in the minds of the NFL, but they just make plays in college, and they go to the pros. And most of the time, but not all the time, they end up being ballers in the pros too.
You hit it on the head there, man. I'll give you a good story, and this is true. I'll pull my reports out. But when Drew Brees came out, I'm down in Lafayette. He would have been in his junior year, getting ready for his senior year, and I'm working out a bunch of free agents. Drew's in the weight room, and I had never met him in person yet to this year. and he came out into the dome, and when guys were running, cheered him on. I mean, we had maybe 4 free agents out there, 3 scouts. Came back in there, did the height, weight, and bench, and he came over and cheered him on the bench, and then all of a sudden I'm heighting him. I go, hey, you want to get on? And he looked at me, and that was the whole deal. Was he going to be 6 foot? He looked at me and goes, I got a month before you guys come back. I still might grow, and winked. And I started laughing, and I said, well, get next to me, you know. And I had someone looking, and I'm 6 foot hair. Now I'm not. I was 6 foot and a half then on a board, and he was right there with me. So I figured he's going to be 6 foot. Well, anyways, you know, I had trouble selling him, and he went the early first pick of the second round. Should have been in the first round. Well, I'm in college football a couple of years ago, and I'm a friend of a friend from Arizona, and his name's Brock Purdy. You probably heard his name. He's at Iowa State. Yeah. So I'm selling Brock, and he comes up to our camp in Syracuse. I told my friends at Louisville I just left. So he's making the circuit. I got all my friends looking at him. He's not – UNLV wouldn't hire this guy. I talked to Montana State, San Diego State. No one will offer him. I get him up to camp. He's the most accurate guy we have. Maybe not the biggest arm. But, man, when you watch his tape, it's pretty. And me and Dino, in a good way, we're looking at him, and Dino goes, he's just not big enough. I said, Dino, he's 6 foot. I go, Russell Wilson, Drew Brees, you're naming all the 6 foot quarterbacks. He can do it. And, you know, I feel bam, you know, and I feel always in my life I've been lucky on quarterback. Not lucky, you know, finding the guys who have the it factor. And I'm so happy for Brock, and I think he'll have a great college career. But, you know, it's just that again, he had something no one else had, leadership. And that's what Drew had. I mean, guys rallied around Drew. It'll be interesting to see what the kid in Arizona does. You know, Murray does for the Cardinals out here. So,
what do you think is going to happen there?
It'll be interesting. I mean, I saw him. I've been over to see him. I've seen him play in a game once, and I saw him at practice. I told Steve, I said, I think the guys love him. He has a cannon. He's got that aura personality. But you're bringing in a really different offense in the National Football League that's never been proven. They'll use wider splits than anybody. So Coach Kingsbury, everybody says, kind of like someone was telling me about Atlanta and Dick's first or second year when they had all those runners, and they go, just wait till about week 4 when the coordinators really zero in. So it'll be interesting. I'm sure he's going to have some growing pains, you know, plus his supporting cast. You know, you look at Peyton, you look at Troy. They didn't win a lot of games as rookies, so, you know, you just hope it don't shatter this kid early. It's hard as a rookie to win. Those guys that do, they're blessed.
Well, I think Peyton went 3-13 his rookie year, and Troy Aikman went 1-15.
I think you got the numbers right.
Well, I think the game's changed. They're looking for playmakers now, good decision makers, guys that can distribute, guys that can manage the clock, lead the team, run the 2-minute, and it's less about how tall you are. And I understand the whole arm strength, you know, discussion. You know, if you throw it like a bullet and it takes a little while for my ball to get there, I've got to throw it into a bigger window or anticipate. You don't have to. And so if I'm an outstanding anticipator, I'm going to be successful. But if I'm not, you're going to be a lot better.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you see? Like of all the players you've been around, whether it was at ASU, you had some really good players when you were there. At every NFL team you've been on, there's always superstar guys. What is the common denominator in the mindset of those players compared to everyone else? And it's almost like, what did the best do better than everyone else?
I just think they're winners. You know, they got that it factor. I look at my last year's. Now, number one, when I came to ASU, they were loaded. You know, I mean, loaded. Gerald Riggs, Mike Pagel. I mean, I'm going on. You know, Jim Jeffcoat, stars. But you go on, and then my last years at ASU, you know, I got to be involved. Coach Marmee, we had Darren Woodson. There wasn't a team in the country that thought Darren Woodson couldn't play. He played Mike Backer for us at 205 pounds. And I modeled Darren's, told scouts that said, just draft him. Trust me. You are going to get a winner. And, me and Daryl Johnson talk about Darren Woodson. I remember Darren Woodson, his last year in the National Football League, he's still lining up on kickoff coverage, all pro safety. Now, you can't hard to get rookies and first-year third-rounders to do it. And you got to tell them that's how you're going to make this team. But that's how important the game Darren Woodson was. He came to us his senior year. Hey, Coach, put me on special teams. I want to be out there, whatever it takes to win. And then after Coach Marley left, I was blessed and had Bruce Snyder. We had Pat Tillman, Jake Plummer. No one thought Jake Plummer would do it. Again, another non-athletic, undersized player. Pat Tillman, we were the only Pac-12 Power 5 offer he had. And those guys love the game of football. And I go on now at Louisville, blessed, my first Heisman Trophy player ever to be around, Lamar Jackson. Oh, Lamar, I don't think any of us saw a Heisman Trophy quarterback. Who does as a high school kid, 17-year-old, 18-year-old coming in? But this kid had an aura to him and confidence. And he goes, and looked at Reggie Bonvin, who they're still friends. He goes, you're wearing my number. That's pretty ballsy to say to the starting quarterback. He didn't say it in a bad way. He said it in a fun way. And you know what? Lamar just let us play to his talking, had fun. He had a calmness in the huddle and was a good leader, and he loved the game of football. I don't know. I looked at Jake, all those guys. They just love football, And
let's go back to Tillman, because Tillman's story is phenomenal. Giving up the NFL to go serve our country and then getting killed by friendly fire. What was Pat Tillman like in college? What was his makeup? And what do you think drove him? And I know you don't know for sure, but what do you think drove him to leave football and go serve our country?
If you watch his, I don't know, I can't remember if it was a 30 for 30 or they did that, a Pat Tillman life. A lot of it hits on the head. I know this. I think if he walked into the Cardinal Stadium or ASU Stadium and saw his number and statues all around, that's not him. I mean, granted, you do that to your heroes, and you should. That he would not want that, knowing Pat. Now, Pat came in, I remember his parents always coming over, but on Pat, this is true, you'll hear it, on his freshman year at Camp Panazona, that's our camp, Coach Snyder would always take 2 or 3 freshmen to eat lunch with and just try to get to know them, or, hey, how you doing? Because we'd go away for 2 weeks. So I'm sitting there, and Pat actually said to the head coach, and I'm like, I almost kicked him underneath the table. He goes, Coach, don't redshirt me. I'm only going to be here 4 years. Now, for a kid at 18 to say that to your head coach, and you barely recruited him, takes balls. And, he, again, non-cocky, Pat had a plan in life. He was going to go play 4 years of football at college, get his degree, and then he was going to try to play in the NFL. And if that didn't go, he had a plan in business, or he was going to be successful in something. And, I left for the NFL after his second year, but I got to be around those guys their senior year a lot more, and then when they came out on pro days. But anyway, that was Pat. And you know what? He didn't start his freshman year, probably should have, but from then on, he was a Pac-10 Player of the Year, Defensive Pac-10 Player of the Year at ASU, and when he went to the Cardinals, I remember Tim Ruskell going, can you get him as a free agent, Davey? And a lot back then, scouts were, you'd call it recruiting. Hey, come to Tampa, maybe I can't give you the same bonus, but you're going to make our team and all that. And I told Tim, I said, Tim, why get in that boat race? Let's just draft him. He's that good. He will make our team, man. And what's funny is the Cardinals take him in the 7th round, and he made that statement. And Larry Marmee, my old head coach, was the defensive back coach. He made that statement and said, I'm going to start. And I told Coach Marmee, I said, give this guy a chance, because he's going to rub you wrong a little bit, because he's not cocky, but he doesn't come on humble. It's just Pat's way, and it ended up becoming, Coach McGinnis and Coach Marmee is one of their favorite players. And, fast forwarded to the NFL thing, going to the Army, I guess 9/11 affected him a lot more. I would see Pat usually in preseason or maybe once off season at an ASU event, but we never got into those deep discussions because 9/11 happened, and then boom, the light switch went on for him, and his family legacy of people in wars, and then I think he thought he could do more for his country, and he do 3 years. He's still young enough to come back and play in the National Football League. I think everybody thought it was I can't say the word cool, but you're like, dang, that takes balls.
Absolutely.
I think this. I mean, I'm not a coward. I know I would get, what do you call that, F1 where you can't pass the physical. So I wish I could have said, yeah, I want to go, but I know I'm not going to pass the physical, But Pat,
Dave, you're not athletic enough.
Good point. But and Pat's brother played baseball, and they went in together, and hey, they just didn't go in. They wanted to be SEALs or Rangers. Fought for their country. Yeah, Pat Tillman will always be a hero in Tempe and the National Football League, but he did it his own way, and like I said, the Tillman, the marathon and the run does everything every year across the nation, raises a lot of money for people in the armed forces for scholarships to come back to school. That part I'm sure he'd be happy at. But again, honor him in his death the way it is. That's not Pat, but it's what you do, and it's been done right.
Dave, you've worked with a lot of awesome coaches. You mentioned several of them. And so when I ask you this question, I'm not saying all the rest are not good, but who's the coach that has the best culture, cast the vision, run the best program, most organized, got the most out of his players? What coach pops in your head that is at the top of the list, and why?
Okay, just real quick, bear with me now because I've been blessed. I should have wrote a book, let alone at ASU, Darryl Rogers, John Cooper, Larry Marmby, Bruce Snyder. But my NFL head coach is Sam Weiss, who I still talk to. It's offensive genius. Tony Dungy. Need not say more than that word, Tony Dungy. All right? Andy Reid. Mike Martz. Probably, I've known Mike since he was 30 years old. I was 20. Probably one of the most offensive geniuses I've ever been around football, right? And then I go to Detroit and work for a guy I've admired since Arizona State since 1992, Rod Marinelli. And then at the Jets, Rex Ryan. And then I went back to college and Bobby Petrino and Dino Babers. I've been blessed, man. It's hard to say who's number one. I will say gets most out of his players, and it is a close one because you're going to be Tony Dungy. But what Rod Marinelli did as an assistant and a head coach, so if I gave him Jason Manecki in the 5th round, he coached him like a first-rounder. If I gave him a free agent, it didn't matter to Rod. He didn't see, Simeon Rice's. He didn't need all. He just wanted football players. And Rod knew whatever you gave him, he was going to get the most out of him, and you knew that. And I don't know if there's a, number one as a person, but he's got to be hands out. The number one D-line coach ever is definitely top 2, but in my book, it's the best. I've been around a lot of great ones. That's hard to say. Mike Ackerley's one of my best friends. Mike.
Yep.
But Rod sets the bar high, and he still is at his age. The most positive guy going through some hardest times of anybody's life. Players, coaches, support staff, whatever you call it. You don't ever want to go 0-16.
No, nobody wants that on their resume, and very difficult how many people are adversely affected by losing. And I think one of the things that kind of is forgotten by a lot of NFL fans is how coaches, front office people, and players are all people too. And when the shit hits the proverbial fan, and that happens around, 7 or 8 clubs a year, guys are selling their houses and they're moving.
Yeah.
And they're dusting up their resumes.
Yep. You get back to the all around. When I got back to college football and Bobby Petrino took all those hits in the National Football League, I don't know if I've ever seen a more organized from off-season program, spring football, recruiting, season, game ready than Coach Petrino. It almost wasn't fun some days. Like my first day on the job, I walked in the staff room. It was right after signing date. You thought they just got their ass whipped by Florida State. I could walk in his office March 17th. I said, hey, I got Teddy Domann on campus, Coach. Hey, Dave, you really think me taking pictures is going to help you get this kid? And I wanted to say, yeah, and he knew it, but he was, You know what helps you recruit is me winning games now. I'm game planning, get out of here. And I respect the man's work ethic and knowing what he had at Louisville and what he's done everywhere. He wins just because he's tough. He demands everything, maybe sometimes too much. But I'll always be a fan, and he is one of the best game day, all-around organized. It's just like not only offense but defense, special teams. One day, I'm watching the snaps and timing, and he yelled at the right wing and yelled at the holder for not having the seams of the ball around. I'm just like, does he miss anything? And then, I get to go work with one of my last year in college football with one of my best friends, and I'm watching an offense that I don't understand, and I'm laughing at the guy at Clemson, what's his name, who's a DC, who can't get his guys lined up while we got 4.7 40 wideouts running by his DBs and upset him on national TV. And they should have beat him again last year. So Dino's, like I said, all my coaches I've been blessed. Mike Martz, you go on, Andy, Tony. I mean, I've been blessed in the National Football League or college football.
Well, it seems like Andy Reid is, well recognized for being the quarterback whisperer with all the guys he's coached. Just share for our audience, what does he do with his quarterbacks, and how does he develop these guys?
That's a good question because, when Andy came to us, he hadn't even been a coordinator yet. And, all of a sudden, he's the head coach calling play. He was the offensive line coach when I first met him at University of UTEP in Missouri. And I believe he was the tight ends coach. And then his last year, he was Brett's coach, quarterback coach of the Packers. I think it's just he listens, and he's, again, very detailed. Coach has a plan on him, and always, he's called me Big Red, and I always teased everybody. I'm gonna dye my hair red and actually walk into the draft room one time when I started getting gray. But I don't know. He's done every place. He's done a great job with Donovan. And again, it's all about your staff too. He had Brad Childress, Pat Schumer. Andy helping him. So you had a bunch of guys teaching Donovan. Alex Smith's best years were, and I thought, great draft pick by the 49ers. I had him ahead of Aaron Rodgers, but because I had him, because Aaron's a hell of an athlete, you just never saw him run in college. Alex ran for almost 1,000 yards his junior year. And but what Andy did with Alex at Kansas City is unbelievable. And now Mahomes, you're right. So I only got to see Andy at the beginning, but I think he's just patient. He listens, and he knows offensive football. He's a student of the game. You know how he got his job was at Northern Arizona University, and a guy named Larry Quintero, who's like 95, still lives in the Valley. Larry goes out with one of my dear friends. And anyway, they're a cute couple, but Larry, this guy showed up at the airport just waiting for Coach Quintero. And on Quintero's staff, it was Brad Childress, Andy Reid, Bill Callahan, and I'm missing the fourth. Oh, Marty Morningway. That's NAU's football staff in 88, 87, something like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
But it's not a shocker when you see a staff that wins, and they've got, they learn from each other, and iron sharpens iron. And then 12 years later, 15 years later, you see these guys in all different places being successful. David, for those young men out there that are playing college football that might be listening to this podcast, and they're excited about the 2020 draft or the 2021 draft or maybe the 2022 draft, what recommendation do you have as somebody that's been in the building on college campuses and been in the draft room and done all the evaluation process with NFL teams? What advice do you have for a guy like that?
I love talking to Coach Babers or Coach Petrino. Maybe let me talk to the underclassmen, especially, let's say, the guys getting ready to be seniors or the guys getting ready to be juniors, and just tell them, hey, what are you waiting for? Don't let this NFL thing come big to you after your senior season. Then all of a sudden you go work out and you work out in the weight room and, drop some baby fat, put on more muscle, and do it now and have some tape So all of a sudden, these scouts don't look around and say, "Oh man, all you did is you ran a great 40 and lifted well. Where are you on this tape?" So don't underachieve early on. It's a yearly process. It's a building process. It's building your resume. Have that goal of playing as a freshman. And the next year, hey, you know what? I'm going to get bigger and stronger. I'm biting into this strength coach. It's amazing, because they work out year round now, how bodies change. You've seen it in your son, I'm sure. I mean, he probably thought he was in good shape leaving your home in Colorado. That looked when he came home from Nebraska the first year. But I just think it's that is idea. Hey, take care of yourself day to day. And if football is really important, keep your body and mind clean. You don't need to be on the streets. College is fun. There's a time to go have fun, but, shut it down, get home, stay away from the things that, that help deteriorate your body. And that's tough to do. The good ones will, and I'm not saying, hey, I was in college, I had a beer or two, but you gotta be smart, and you need your sleep. You need your sleep. You need your strength. And I think if the kids who start earlier, it shows then. I feel sorry for those guys, their senior year, and they're 6'2", 4.50 40s wideouts and career catches 10. Well, there's a reason they only got 10 catches. And it wasn't because of his hands he couldn't catch. It's because he probably didn't study the game and didn't work real hard till the end, and got beat out every year. So those type of underachievers you hate to see happen, because I wasn't given that ability most of these guys have. So God gave them this gift of their bodies and their strength and their athletic ability. I just hope they use their potential, and that's what I try to preach to them, and trust me, the harder the work, it will show. If they want to play at that next level, it will show, and I would tell anybody that,
I want to thank David Boller for being on our show today, talking about what it's like to be a GM, an NFL scout, a college director of personnel, a road warrior, and a guy that's got a tremendous amount of contacts all across football in our country at the highest level. David, thanks for being on today.
Appreciate it, Craig. Appreciate your friendship all my years, man.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Pro Mindset. If you enjoyed this podcast, please subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. 5 stars, of course. You can follow us on our website, promindsetpodcast.com, or on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at Pro Mindset Podcast. Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you the next time.